Creatine doesn't help you with reps 1, 2, or 3, but with reps 8, 9, and 10, it will help get another extra rep potentially. If you're really tired, long day of work, and you guys know after a day of work and towards the end of the day, your boss is like, hey, do this, and you're like, my brain is mush. Your brain will be less mush on creatine than it would be without it, helping you in that last mile, so to speak. Maybe something like, I don't know, half a coffee, but without the jitters. Not terrible. Looks like creatine does something for the brain. It's pretty good stuff. Hey folks, Dr. Mike here for RP Strength. Lots of talk lately about creatine for brain gains, for memory, for attention, for cognitive enhancement of all kinds. What's the deal? Does creatine make you smarter? Let's find out. I worked with OpenAI's O3 mega hyper super intelligence to aggregate a bunch of information, which I'm going to spill down your throat, baby bird style, if you just let me. But just let me help you. I looked at 4 of the best literature reviews on the subject, which take a bunch of studies together and look at all of them at the same time. And for our last slot, I looked at the single biggest randomized control trial, a direct study itself, on the effects of creatine on various cognitive parameters. Let us find out what I discovered. Time to get scienced, get the lube and the tissue. 3, 2, 1, lube tissue. First systematic review was published in 2018 by Avgerinos et al. And Associates. It was published in the Journal of Experimental Gerontology, which is going to be a theme because older folks seem to be a big target of creatine research nowadays. The systematic review looked at 6 total trials, 6 experiments were included, with a total sample size of 281 individuals, which is pretty decent. They took between 5 and 20 grams of creatine per day. It's kind of a lot. And the trials were conducted for between 1 week to figure out acute effects to 6 weeks to figure out more long-term, medium-term effects. And short-term memory and reasoning had improved in creatine versus placebo in 4 out of the 6 trials, which gives us an overall pooled effect size rated as small to moderate. So something is almost certainly happening. It's not a huge deal for short-term memory and reasoning, but it is a deal. They tested other domains, things like attention span, long-term memory, and executive function, your ability to kind of stay on task and coordinate multiple things going on at the same time. And those results were either mixed results where some of the studies found benefits, others didn't, or null where none of the studies really found any benefits. In these studies, an interesting situation occurred, which is vegetarians, folks that don't eat meat, showed larger gains in their short-term memory and reasoning than omnivores who did also consume meat when the two went head-to-head in trials. That's curious because we know that vegetarians probably undereat creatine, which in a natural diet mostly occurs from meat sources unless you supplement it. This is going to be a theme recurring. Vegetarians seem to be able to benefit more from creatine than meat eaters, which doesn't say creatine is bad for meat eaters. It's also good, but it's probably saying vegetarians really should consider creatine, if not just for the muscle growth stuff, but potentially for some of the brain gains as well. And so the real world application of this is you essentially like have a boost that's noticeable in the lab, subtle in daily life, but will definitely help, not in a way that you can tell, but in real world, you won't be able to be like, oh, I'm extra sharp today because of the creatine, but it will be working in the background. And the effect is going to be most obvious and most helpful when you're in a high mental fatigue state. So like creatine is similar in the brain as it is in muscles. Creatine doesn't help you with reps 1, 2, or 3, but with reps 8, 9, and 10, it will help get another extra rep potentially. If you're really tired, long day of work, and you guys know after a day of work and towards the end of the day, your boss is like, hey, do this. And you're like, my brain is mush. Your brain will be less mush on creatine than it would be without it, helping you in that last mile, so to speak. And you get the best effects here if you have a low baseline brain creatine, which is to say if you're vegan, often if you're female, or if you're on an energy-restricted diet. So if you're vegan, female, and on an energy-restricted diet, supplementing creatine is starting to look pretty awesome. Now, what are the downsides here? The caveats, the takeaways, or the sort of the constraints on our ability to conclude. It's only 6 studies. They're not gigantic either, so it's not amazing. There's a high heterogeneity of studies, which is good if you want to reach broad conclusions, but if you want to lens in on something actually real, it's not good. And because there's not a lot of studies in small sample sizes, the heterogeneity here is not ideal. Most of the tasks presented have what's called low ecological validity, which means the tasks they test you on, it's like, here's a string of numbers, tell this to us backwards, and write it down really quickly. You got 5 seconds to look at it, 5 seconds to wait, and then 5 seconds to write them all down. There's nothing like you do exactly like that in the real world. These are tests designed to measure abstract reasoning and attention span abilities. They do map onto the real world, but not very strongly. So you could be like not so great at any of these tests, but still be a baller in the real world. So when creatine improves these tests, can we say confidently that it's going to improve real world intelligence and cognition? Not so confidently, but a little bit confidently. So there is room for some hope here in this situation. All right, that's just one meta-analysis. That was in 2018. Now we have another meta-analysis from 2023. It's by Prokopidis et al., which I say only pronouncing in Russian because I think it's Greek, and good God knows how those people with their love affairs with men pronounce things in any case. So this was a memory-focused meta-analysis. It was done in the journal Nutrition Reviews. They looked at 10 randomized control trials, so 10 separate studies. Their combined subject pool was 404 people. That's pretty decent. And they were testing adults that were between 18 and 76 years old, which is really important. So you might be able to learn some things about how older folks respond here. The pooled overall memory effect for creatine supplementation was in the low to moderate effect score category. So the Hedges G, which is a statistical abstraction, was a 0.27, which means that it's definitely a thing that seems to work in these trials. It's not crazy revolutionary, but it's a bit of a big deal. And the sub-analysis here is really interesting. Adults over the age of 65 got double the benefit. So their Hedges G score was 0.45, which means what? For over 65-year-old adults, on average, in these group of studies, they got in their ability to recall things quickly a rewind of about 3 to 5 years of cognitive deterioration in old age. So however good you are at about 64 years old, this would rewind you back to age 60 levels of cognitive ability. All things being equal, that's a big deal. For younger folks, the bump is going to be like 1 extra item on a digit span score, which means you're a bit better in memory, but nothing crazy. So it's nothing crazy for young people, but something pretty meaningful, though not crazy, but very meaningful for seniors. There was publication bias flagged, not a big deal because the statistical treatment after still revealed effects, but not ideal. And unfortunately, all of the trials were less than 6 weeks in duration. And the thing is, creatine in the brain takes 4 weeks to come up to its higher levels at which it plateaus. So we actually might expect even better results if more of the studies were conducted in that 5 to 10 week range, but pretty much none were. Some good findings here so far. Let's look at our next meta-analysis. This one is from, I don't know how to say XU. Is it Hu et al. Or Zhu et al.? I have no idea. Chinese people, let me know. Y'all are great. This was a broad adult meta-analysis of the effects of creatine on cognition published in Frontiers of Nutrition journal. 16 randomized control trials, no doubt some of the ones included in the other studies, plus some more. 492 total people analyzed, which is really good, ages 20 to 76, all with creatine monohydrate, the most effective and vetted form of creatine. Improvements were seen in memory. Improvements were seen in attention time, how much attention they could put to a task before they wavered, and processing speed also improved, with the biggest responders being females and folks that were 18 to 60 years old, interestingly enough, and clinical cohorts as well. Folks with fibromyalgia, for example, seem to respond better. The real world situation here is as a creatine user, you might experience something like a 5% quicker reaction time and a noticeable pop in your recall ability, especially in multitask settings, that fluidity of brain. And maybe something like, I don't know, half a coffee, but without the jitters. Not terrible. Not terrible. Now, the effect for memory, attention time, and processing speed was better, but overall cognition and executive function were not significant. So it's not like creatine boosts everything about your brain, just some stuff. And the effect for memory is moderate. It's not high. And unfortunately, many of the sub-trials, they did a pooled analysis, but many of the sub-trials are quite underpowered. So, the median N size, the median number of people they tested per trial was 24 people, which means the probability each trial gives you an erroneous statement is decent. So good news here, some real good stuff on memory, attention time, processing speed, nothing crazy, but definitely detectable over and over in multiple studies. Looks like creatine does something for the brain. It's pretty good stuff. Now, we have our little number 4 here, our last review of the evidence, not its own study, is the European Food Safety Authority's scientific opinion on creatine and cognitive improvements, published in 2024. The panel reviewed randomized controlled trials and mechanistic data. So like, how would this work if it did work, molecule to molecule in the brain? And they judged all of the evidence in total for any domain of cognitive enhancement as insufficient for creatine, and they considered the mechanism weak. Damn, Scott, that's kind of insulting, isn't it? You were judged as weak. That's some like 300 getting kicked into the pit type of shit in Europeans. Now, here's the thing. The European regulators basically said like, oh, cool, like, it's a nice idea, but we need much more data to be certain about this. The good news for creatine is that the European Food Safety Authority is insanely conservative. You got to have a real high bar with them to show that you have an effective supplement. And so lots of effective supplements just don't meet the criteria. It doesn't mean the supplements aren't effective. It means the criteria is very high. So can you scream at the top of your lungs to the European peoples while they're trying to club and eat sausages? Everyone has to take creatine for brain gains. It'll change your life. No. But does creatine still help aspects of your cognition? Yes, it seems that it does. Lastly, number 5, the biggest randomized control trial, single study in this group, is by Sandkuhler et al. Yes, that's also a very European person. Sandkuhler, I know personally, was smoking an elongated cigarette as he did the data analysis of the study. He, she, I don't know. Well, so in Europe, we're sort of beyond gender. It's not very cool to talk about. 123 omnivores and vegetarians and one giant pit to battle. No, that was a dream I had last night. This was just them being tested to see if creatine enhanced their cognition. They were given 5 grams of creatine a day, which is a good robust dose. And the thing ran for 6 weeks. And it was also a double-blind crossover trial. So they would do 6 weeks of creatine or placebo. They didn't know. They took 6 weeks off completely of any placebo or creatine. Then they did 6 weeks of the opposite, either creatine if they had placebo last time or placebo if they had creatine last time. Again, they didn't know. And then they measured at both pre-post. So this is a very, very robust study design. The only knock on the study design is a 6-week washout with how long creatine takes to get into your brain and back out. Might be a little short, but I think it's pretty decent. And what it showed was that working memory, as measured by the backward digit span, which is a really annoying test to take. My OCD does not make me very good at that test, showed that there was a borderline small effect on working memory. And they also tested the user's abilities to do the Raven's progressive matrices test, a test I am personally brilliant at. Mike, brag more about your stupid tests. Okay. So anyway, this one time, no, sorry, it was a joke. Raven's progressive matrices is probably, I would say, the most robust test of deep pattern matching intelligence abilities, and it takes a long time to do. It's usually not even timed. They're like, take a few hours. At some point, you just won't be able to solve some of the problems. And there seemed to be no effect on the Raven score. So we could probably rule out that creatine makes you in some deep way like smarter. Like if you talk to if you have a special fancy account with OpenAI, they let you use the research preview of GPT 4.5. It's not going to take you to those places. But on working memory, it does have a small noticeable effect. They did note some side effects. These are just regular people. Some people got GI upset. They got bloating. Scott, do you bloat from creatine? Do you get GI upset?
Nope. I feel great on it.
I've never met anyone who actually gets these side effects.
Yeah, I never have either.
Yeah. I can't even tell I'm taking creatine. It's just
same. Completely transparent.
Yeah. So these side effects were more common than with placebo, but they were also described as mild. No big deal. And it seems to be that if you are cognitively taxing yourself consistently, really pushing your brain to the max, creatine might feel like a 1 rep upgrade in working memory. Not a new brain, but I can use a rep here and there. Not bad. Not bad. Now, here's the kind of complexity, and this is why science is a mother. In this best of all randomized controlled trials, they found that there was no omnivore-vegan interaction. Like vegans didn't do any better, or vegetarians didn't do any better with creatine than omnivores did, which a lot of the other studies do show. So we still think it's an effect, but this time it didn't show up, which means it's probably not this enormous, crazy psychotic effect. So across all 5 of these modes of analysis, which is 4 of the best review studies and the best randomized control trial, what can we conclude about creatine and the brain gains? Scott, can you imagine like a little gif of like a little brain, like but with biceps, and he's like curling, and he's like, yeah.
That's sweet.
Yeah.
Love it.
And then he's like, man, should I like up the weight or should I up the trend or like what? And then he's like, I wonder if Stacy's ever going to notice me when I get more jacked. Oh, I'm just overthinking it. I'm a brain, you know? Anyway. Take homes. The magnitude of creatine's effect on reaction time, episodic and working memory, and other such subcategories of cognition is something like 3 to 8% improvement, which isn't crazy. It's small, but it's not trivial. It's not likely to be just statistical error. It probably actually helps those things for real at a deep mechanistic level. And there are folks that can benefit probably a lot more, and other folks that might benefit, but a little bit less. On the more benefit side is people who don't eat a lot of meat or have vegan or vegetarian diets. Women, especially when they're perimenopausal, it seems. Folks that are in chronic sleep debt. Look, listen to Brian Johnson. Don't be in chronic sleep debt. It's up in about 18 different other ways. Or folks that have metabolic and neurological conditions, and especially older folks. But if you're younger, you're jacked, you're an omnivore, and you already take 5 grams of creatine per day just for the extra swollenness, you can expect an uptick in your cognition, but it's going to be very small. And I almost promise too subtle for you to notice. It's still happening though, but it's going to be very subtle. Dosing and timelines, as far as if you want to take creatine to boost your brain gains, 3 to 5 grams per day, though I would just go on the safe side and take 5 grams per day of creatine monohydrate. It's going to take 4 weeks to get your creatine in your brain up to standard levels that really help the most. So keep taking it. You can take 20 grams of creatine per day for like a week or 2 to really boost those levels up faster, but it's going to lead to more GI distress and more wallet distress because it's a good way to piss away creatine. Like, you should be taking creatine for months, if not indefinitely. So just ramp up normally with 5 grams per day, set it, forget it. Eventually your levels will be really good. And then 4 weeks later, you'll be like Superman thinking about shit no one's ever thought about before they even thought about it. That's right. Figure that one out. So the bottom line here is this, folks, all jokes aside. Creatine is cheap. Creatine is safe. It's already in your gym bag. You're already using it to get jacked, and it does help with that. For most lifters, for most of you guys, it's really a why not? If I'm already taking creatine or considering it for muscle growth, I might as well get a little brain boost. And then it's an insurance policy. It's awesome. It's just a little bit of an enhancer, kind of like going from 1080p resolution to 1140p. Not crazy, but for those adult videos you really like to zoom in on, might make all the difference. So does creatine boost brain gains? Yes. Is it a very small amount? Yes. Is it a real amount? Yes. So when people out there tell you creatine doesn't do shit for your brain, they're probably wrong. When people out there are trying to hawk their creatine supplement for 5 times the normal amount because it'll revolutionize your cognition, they're probably exaggerating. But you know what isn't an exaggeration? Is that the RP Diet Coach app and the RP Hypertrophy app together can not only make sweet love to you, but that sweet love will result in a leaner physique, a more muscular physique, and you know what? More happiness. Because why wouldn't you be happy if you were more jacked and more lean? Links in the description for those digital products for you to purchase with your money. And in the meantime, be swell and take an extra scoop of creatine for Scott the Video Guy. Why not? See you guys next time.